Hi, everyone. My name is Samantha Terry. I am the NPU University Program Manager, and we would like to welcome you to Zoning Fundamentals 1. This is actually our first official open course for NPU University's semester, we'll call it. And I appreciate having all of you all here today. Let's see here. We are joined here by our wonderful NPU team. Tony, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Tony McNeil. Glad to be here with you tonight.
Nicole.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I am happy to have recently joined the team. I look forward to working with you all. Glad to be here as well.
And is Daniel on yet? I don't know if Daniel's on yet, but Daniel will probably be in later if he's not already. Since it's 6:05, we're going to go ahead and get started. Will this recording be sent to us? The link will be provided to where the recording will be, which will be housed on our actual webpage. All righty, so let me. So again, this is P1004 4.001 Zoning Fundamentals. There's a lag, it's lagging. So we have a couple of house rules. We ask that you please keep your microphones muted. Use the reactions to clap or give a thumbs up. To ask any questions or make a comment during our Q&A, please raise your hand to get to the queue. And all questions must be relevant to the course content. I know a lot of times we think of situations that may have happened in our communities or neighborhoods, and it kind of gets us a little off task. Those kind of questions we could possibly take at the end, or we could forward to our instructor and she can address those directly. But we want to stick to the actual course content because we only have a limited time, and that's our 2 hours. If you're not familiar with how Zoom works, if you want to raise your hand at the bottom corner right here where it says reactions, you click on that and then click on the raise your hand option. And now I'm going to actually turn it over to our wonderful teacher and host. This is our 3rd time teaching this for us, and the class seems to be getting popular by the year. So Ms. Kieta, I'm going to turn it over to you right now.
Thank you, ma'am. And can you allow me to share my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kieta Holmes, and I am the director of the Office of Zoning and Development in the Department of City Planning. My office is located at City Hall on the 3rd floor on the left-hand side of the atrium in Suite 3350. And it is in that office that my staff and I regulate zoning and provide entitlement services as a part or in a part of the development services of the city of Atlanta. Still can't share, Sam. Tonight is the first of 3 courses. This is Zoning Fundamentals 1. And I really like for everyone who attends Zoning Fundamentals 1 to also register for Zoning Fundamentals 2 as well as 3. At the end of tonight's course, after the Q&A, I will provide a homework assignment. And that homework assignment will be the topic of discussion for Zoning Fundamentals 2. And we will start breaking some stuff down, getting deep into it, and so that to provide even more content and information to you all. So that is something for you all to look forward to. With that, I will begin. So in my office, we are broken up into several teams. One being zoning, the zoning team with an assistant director who that is currently vacant, and we're actively seeking someone to fill that position. The zoning team is responsible for all of the applications that are before the zoning review board or the Board of Zoning Adjustment. It is staffed by urban planners, urban planner 1 and 2, that are responsible for writing the staff reports that you all see. That is posted on the website, and then is presented to the zoning review board for them, zoning review board or Board of Zoning Adjustment, to make a recommendation. In addition to them, there are the SAP urban planners. Those planners are responsible for all the subdivision applications, replats, lot consolidations, historic lots of record, as well as the special administrative permit applications, or SAP for short. SAPs are not required in every single zoning district. They're only required in quality of life districts, or for properties that are in SPIs, or the properties that are within the Beltline overlay. An SAP application is a pre-development application. It's a permitting application that is required for developments that are in certain zoning districts, and it checks and makes sure that all of the zoning requirements related to the way the building looks on the site, the way that the building materials or sidewalks or any of those quality of life concerns are actually a part of development. The next section that we have is our brownfields and CDP legislation, led by Jessica Lavendier. That is the place where that is the group that is responsible for all of the brownfield revolving loan programs that we administer here in the city. And in fact, we are an award-winning program, having been recognized by the EPA for the work that we've done with brownfields in the city, as well as any land use amendments that are submitted with an application or as a part of a redevelopment proposal or proactive rezoning. The land uses change, and Jessica is responsible for leading up that team. And lastly, and certainly not least, is our land development team, led by our project manager, Tamaria Latane. And that group is responsible for review of all the building permit applications that are submitted. So when you submit a building permit application, we are a review agency, and we are checking for all of the zoning requirements that are in your zoning ordinance that are required as a part of any development. So now, what is zoning? The zoning, by definition, is a division of the city or county by legislative regulations into areas or zones which specify allowable uses. It also regulates real property with regard to size restrictions for buildings within these areas. And that is the definition, technical definition of zoning. The regular definition of zoning, or the more common definition of zoning, is the allowance of uses on, the regulation of uses on private property. So how did we get to where we are today? We got here, we started with a plan in one of the most famous plans is the Philadelphia plan that's laid out in grids, and that was done by William Penn. And then there's a radiocentric plan where it kind of starts out, it is like radio dials, and that is the Annapolis plan done by Francis Nicholson. And then in 1733, the ward system was created in Savannah, and that was done by Oglethorpe. And these are probably the very basic plans that laid out cities, that provided for where uses could go, how people moved and lived in very early times. And it was what predated what we do in modern day planning and zoning today. With that, we got to the professional practice of planning. And we started with new laws to regulate tenement housing in New York. And that moved to the first local planning board being established in 1907 in Hartford. And then in 1909 was the very first planning conference. The planning conference is where all of us planners get together. One, there's a requirement for us to train in certain areas with regard to ethics. We've added this year, we've got to get a social justice credit, we've got to get law credits, so that we can keep abreast of all the things that affect the jobs that we do on a daily basis. And that started out initially with very small planning conferences and then evolved into that what we do today in our national planning conferences. Also, schools of thought were created so that people could learn about this profession and then apply those things that they learn across the country. Later, with that information, what was established was a number of landmark cases that created development tools for planning. The most, probably the one that we all learned most about is in 1926 with Euclid versus Ambler, and that established the principal practice of land use and zoning in the country. It established a system of zoning whereby a town or a community is divided into areas where specific uses or land is permitted. And what is commonly called is Euclidean zoning. That means there's places for residential, there's places for commercial, there's places for industrial, and all those are separated and none of those mix. And what that created was this zoning map that you see here from Zion, Illinois in 1920. It separates uses. You can see in the legend, there's a place for residential, there's a place for business, there's a place for industrial, and that is pretty much how zoning evolved for a number of years until we got to a place where we started thinking, well, maybe everything doesn't need to be separated. There can be some uses that are together. There is a legal framework with regard to how zoning is established and used in the country. First, it is established by the United States Constitution and then federal laws related to the Telecommunications Act. And then those laws from the Constitution are then given to Georgia and to the Georgia Constitution and the Georgia statutes. And then the Georgia gives local authority to municipalities to zone and regulate land. And then we do that through our local ordinances, one being our 1982 City of Atlanta zoning ordinance as amended, what is now the 2021 comprehensive plan, which is Plan A. And also we also have Atlanta City Design, which is the plan for our city. And all of that regulates all of our land use here in the city of Atlanta. The federal Constitution provides under the First Amendment the freedom of speech, religion, and press, and those are the laws that protect signage. In the city of Atlanta, we do have a sign code. However, we are prohibited from regulating any type of the content that is found on the sign. We can regulate the size of the sign, the location of the sign, the types of the sign, but we cannot regulate the speech because that is protected by the First Amendment. And then the 5th and the 14th Amendments are related to the due process and takings related to zoning cases. We cannot take someone's property. There has to be a process by which that property is taken. And so there's a process of eminent domain, a process of condemnation, because of the Constitution protects people's property rights. The 14th Amendment also does due process and equal protection, and then it extends the rights of the First and the Fifth Amendments protections to the state in any state action, which means there is a process by which someone can submit an application. We cannot prohibit anyone from submitting an application. That application has to have a due process hearing, that is the public hearing held by the Zoning Review Board, and it has to have an action by City Council. As long as those things are consistent and clear and they are void of any type of controversy, then we are providing and protecting someone's property rights and their due process. Police power is the sovereign power of the state to regulate and control private behavior. That police power is then given to local municipalities and delegated by states to counties and counties to municipalities. And what we are protecting with regard to zoning is the protection of health, safety, morals, property values, convenience, and general welfare. It's a very long statement, and it means that what we do with regard to zoning should protect someone's health, it should protect their safety, their property values, it should be convenient, no one should be inconvenienced, it should not be a problem or an issue of due course or due process. Everything should be about the protection of those that, one, have the property, own the property, and then are around the property. So zoning districts prevent commercial businesses or industrial buildings from being scattered between residential homes. That's Euclidean zoning. As you know, the city of Atlanta adopted an industrial mix zoning district about 3 years ago. I'm trying to remember my COVID years here, about 3 years ago. And that zoning district allows industrial uses as defined by that zoning district, as well as residential and other non-residential uses together. Also, zoning is predictable, is uniform in its lot development. So zoning ordinances establish building heights. Residential properties are 35 feet in height. It establishes setbacks. Some setbacks are 30 feet for larger districts. Some are 35 for even larger districts. Some are 20 for smaller districts. Some side yard setbacks are 5 to 5 or 15 or 7 feet. All of that is predictable so that irregular lots are not created. Now, that does not mean that there cannot be an irregular lot somewhere, or that a lot does not conform to a zoning, because as you know, zoning changes just about every 2 weeks as there is an action by city council. So a property can exist in a state before, and it had a certain setback, it had a certain zoning district, and then the zoning comes in and wipes it all away, and then that property then becomes non-conforming. But the initial thought is that everything is in orderly fashion and orderly pattern. Zoning establishes height limitations, lot coverages, setbacks, and fence heights. These standards keep buildings from being built too close to a neighbor's property, and it prevents fences so tall that they overshadow your yard. Now, that does not mean that someone cannot apply for a special exception here in the city of Atlanta. In a city of Atlanta, a special exception is the application that you would submit if you were seeking to increase the height of your fence, meaning you would submit that application for a special exception. It goes to the public process, it goes to the neighborhood, to the NPU, to the Board of Zoning Adjustment. And should your property have been found to be irregular, it is not the proper size for the zoning district, it has some type of topo issues, it's irregularly shaped, perhaps the Board of Zoning Adjustment will grant you that special exception to increase your fence height. That is also the same with regard to lot coverage and setbacks. You can ask for a reduction in a setback. You can ask for an increase in a lot coverage, or you can ask for an increase in a height limitation depending upon the transitional height plan. All of those things are considered reliefs to the code. That is a relief that you're asking from the requirement. And though all of the relief applications are heard by the Board of Zoning Adjustment. And lastly, it requires compatible uses. Zoning regulations protect property values by adding predictability, meaning if you're in a subdivision in a neighborhood, it's pretty much understood that each and every house in that particular neighborhood has pretty much the same setbacks, has pretty much the same lot size, has pretty much the same house that's being built on top of it, because zoning is supposed to be predictable. This reduces the risk that your property will lose its value if your neighbor wanted to run a tattoo parlor out of their home and attracts increased traffic or causes problems. And lastly, the appearance. Zoning aims to improve the appearance of certain areas. That's why you see in certain requirements, you may see a requirement for brick. You may see a requirement for a cornice. You may see a requirement for a parapet. All those things are about the appearance and how things, the relationship of the building to the street. Zoning affects parking, any type of off-street parking, and now we allow on-street parking as a part of the zoning ordinance, trying to allow more uses and a better fit in the urban environment in which we live. So there is a minimum procedure by which an application goes through the process of a rezoning, and then ultimately at the end, a zoning decision is granted by City Council as the legislative body of the city. This procedure is established by the state of Georgia, and it is called the ZPL for short, or Zoning Procedures Law. It requires that there be, it is done for the adoption of a zoning ordinance, for a text amendment, for the rezoning of a property, for zoning annexed property, or for the granting of a special use permit. It requires a hearing. The hearing is either before the zoning review board or before the Board of Zoning Adjustment. It requires that there be a newspaper notice that if you are seeking to want to do a little extra homework, you can go back to older copies of the Fulton County Daily Report, and you'll find notices of agendas, because it is required to be posted in the newspaper. And that is a requirement 15 days prior to the hearing date. It must include the time, the place, the purpose of the hearing, and the location and current and proposed zoning. So you'll see what I read. If you've ever been to a zoning review board meeting, you'll hear me read a case number, you'll hear me read a legal description, you'll hear me read an address and other factors related to the property, because all that is required and in accordance with zoning procedures law. In addition to that, you will also have a sign posting. Now, in the Department of City Planning, all of the offices that have public hearing requirements or ZPL requirements have a color-coded sign associated with them. For the zoning review board, that sign would be green. So if you see green signs around the city, those signs are zoning signs, meaning there's a zoning action about to take place. If you see a blue sign, that's a variance application, either that is an appeal to an administrative decision, that is a request for a variance, or that is a special exception request. The Urban Design Commission or Historic Preservation, their signs are red. The Tree Commission, their signs are yellow and white, and I believe there's an orange sign. And then the subdivision, if there's a new subdivision being proposed, there is an orange sign also associated with that. That sign is required to be posted on the property in a conspicuous place so that people that are passing by can see it. In the pandemic, we had to make adjustments to our signs, and now you see QR codes. Those QR codes link you to our website, and on our website, you will find our agenda so that people could be noticed during the pandemic in the time when we were not actually meeting in the office. Now, what is your role in the process? So when you receive an application, that means that application has been sent to the Department of City Planning. The applicant has paid. It has been, the administrative stuff has been done on the application. The council member has received the application. All of the service delivery departments, watershed, traffic, transportation, all those people have received a copy of the application. And then you also have received an application either through your MPU chair or through your zoning contact. What we anticipate and hope that it happens, that when the MPU chairs receive that information, MPU chairs and or zoning contacts, when they receive that information, that it is also then forwarded to the neighborhood association. So the neighborhood associations also have a copy of that application. We ask that you read those applications. If you have questions of those applications, you can contact the assigned planner who is assigned to the application. You can contact myself or Raquel, who is the BZA secretary, or you can even contact your assigned planner to your MPU, and they will also get the questions to us, and we will provide answers to them. All of our information regarding contact should be on the website, and I'll also be providing contact information at the end of this meeting for you all to use. All of that is done because your role in the process is very important. One, you are the residents who are the most impacted, and probably the most impacted, more so impacted than any other person would be that is not living near the places where these actions are about to take place. So in the city of Atlanta, we have about 200 plus districts, including all of. Did you need to mute? Did someone need to break in? Okay, all right. So we have about 200 plus zoning districts, including all of the SPI sub areas. There are about 17 SPIs, the newest SPIs being SPI 4, SPI 19, and SPI 3. There are a number of historic districts, neighborhood commercial districts, there are overlay districts, and then there are planned development districts. We have a lot of hybrid zoning in our city, meaning we have a lot of mixed use, we have a lot of single use, we have a lot of things that we hope are responsive to a number of the uses and concerns of a number of residents, as well as other stakeholders in the city. We, however, have a very, very large and voluminous code. And there are a lot of requirements that are outdated. Some of them are don't meet the needs of an urban environment, and therefore is the reason why we are immediately in the middle of the process of rewriting our zoning code. The code has not holistically been rewritten since 1982 when it was adopted, other than the text amendments and other amendments that we've done. But we are now in the midst of rewriting the entire code so that it may be more responsive to the needs of a growing city of Atlanta.
Kieta, really quickly, we had a question. What is SPI?
Special Public Interest District.
All right.
Okay, computer.
Oh, and also what is SAP and CDP? While you're getting your computer together, SAP and CDP.
SAP stands for Special Administrative Permit, and CDP stands for Comprehensive Development Plan. The table before you is our land use and zoning classification map chart. This is the chart that we use when someone comes to the office and they're seeking to rezone. This is how we tell whether or not a proposed district is compatible, or what districts are compatible with which land uses, and how we make determinations and recommendations related to any land use changes. This chart can be found on our website, and it is updated with our newest zoning districts, MRMU and IMIX. So this is the process map by which an application goes through the zoning review board process. An application is filed with the Office of Zoning and Development. About a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago now, we established and created what is called the Concept Review Committee, or CRC. Concept Review Committee meets the second and fourth Friday of every single month, and it is led by Christian Otianu in my office. It is a pre-development meeting, and it is required prior to the submittal of a rezoning application or of a subdivision application. An applicant is required to attend that meeting and provide their site plan. And at that meeting, all of the review agencies, including zoning, buildings, fire, watershed, and transportation, provide comments to an applicant who is proposing a development. The CRC was established because a number of developers were getting into the development process and finding that the things that they wanted to do either could not be done through development, or was going to be too costly and projects were being abandoned, or they would be in the development process so long that it became burdensome. So the CRC was established. So CRC, or Concept Review Committee, is required prior to the submittal to the office for the rezoning application. Once the application is submitted, it is processed and I receive a copy of it. The council member of the affected district receives a copy. The MPU chair, the MPU zoning contact, all receive copies of the application, and then all of the review agencies receive a copy of the application. At the time that the application is sent, it is also assigned to a planner on the zoning staff, and then that planner is required to send what is called a planner introduction to the applicant. That planner introduction includes information with regard to what the MPU is, when the MPU meets, as well as pertinent dates for the applicant to start keeping them on track related to their application. If the application receives a positive recommendation out of the MPU and it is not deferred, or there are any other issues, it is scheduled for a zoning review board hearing. The zoning review board hearings occur 2 times a month, the first and second Thursdays of every single month. There are times when depending on the number of cases, where an extra hearing will have to be held in order for an application to meet a certain zoning committee or city council. But the schedule as posted is usually the schedule of twice a month, the first and second Thursday of the month. Once that application is heard by zoning review board, then all three recommendations or the recommendation from the zoning review board is sent to the zoning committee of city council. The zoning committee of city council meets twice a month, and that is the second and the fourth Monday of every single month at 11 a.m. There is no public comment on any application that has been heard or will be heard before the zoning review board at zoning committee. There's no public comment at all. It is the city council members of zoning committee making a recommendation to city council. Once that zoning committee meeting of city council is held, in the next city council meeting, the full council will make a determination on an application, whether to approve it or to deny it. If an application is approved, then the mayor has 8 days to sign the legislation, or to allow it to pass by law, or he or she may veto the legislation. If the legislation is approved, then an applicant does have recourse if they do not agree with the approval, if they do not agree with the action by city council, then the appeal period is 30 days from the date that it becomes law, and it has to be filed within 30 days by the Fulton County Superior Court, or at the Fulton County Superior Court. If that time lapses at all, then that appeal period has also lapsed. With regard to the Board of Zoning Adjustment, or the BZA is a quasi-judicial board, and so once they make an action, once they make a decision, it is final. The application is filed by the Office of Zoning and Development. There is a requirement for what is called a certificate, a referral certificate. The referral certificate comes after a review of the application and the site plan. And so that is when the plan reviewer or the assigned planner is reviewing the application to determine all the setbacks that are needed, all the relief requirements that are needed. And you'll find that information inside the application as page 2 is the referral certificate. Once the referral certificate is completed, then all the administrative information process is completed in our office, and then the same people are notified. MPU chair, MPU zoning contact are notified of the application, and I also receive a copy of the application. It is also assigned to a staff planner, and that planner then sends a planner introduction to the applicant, providing information related to the MPU and hearing dates and information that's pertinent to the Board of Zoning Adjustment. Like the Zoning Review Board, if there's a favorable recommendation out of the MPU, then the BZA hearing is set. The BZA hearing dates are also the first and second Thursday of every month. They, however, meet at noon, and that's noon during the day. And once the board hears an application, they make a decision, and that decision is final. What happens from the decision is the staff will provide a result letter of all the findings from the BZA, and then anyone who is aggrieved by a decision by the Board of Zoning Adjustment also has an appeal period. That appeal period is 30 days and must be filed with the Fulton County Superior Court. So now let's talk about a particular district and the parts of a district let's see if I can. So on your screen before you is the zoning code, and this is the chapter 6, which is single family residential. And I wanted to stop here to talk about how, if you receive an application or if you're deciding about submitting an application, how you should, some evaluative information that you should use when you're making a consideration. So I'm going to take it from the perspective if I'm an NPU resident, an NPU volunteer, and I've received an application for a rezoning. So if someone submits an application to me and I've received that application from Valerie, who's in my office, and it's an application to rezone from R4 to R4A or whatever. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is what I should do is go to the statement of intent, because the statement of intent is going to tell me what this district is designed to do. In particular, with regard to R4, this is to provide for the protection of existing single-family communities and new communities of medium size and density that's not more than one dwelling unit per 9,000 square feet. And so now I'm thinking, okay, so this person's pretty much trying to put a single-family home into this district or onto this piece of property. I'm also going to look at what's permitted on the permitted principal uses and structures, and read the application, and they're trying to put in a single family home. Okay, that's pretty much cool. They can do that. So also they may also be wanting to ask to do maybe an accessory dwelling. And now I can go to where the accessory uses are listed. And that is in section 4 of this particular district. And I can go down to number 12 and see that accessory dwelling units, for the total number of dwelling units on any parcel, including the accessory dwelling unit, does not exceed 2. And I can look at their application and go, okay, they're trying to do an accessory dwelling unit too. So now I know they're doing a single family home with an accessory dwelling unit, and all of that is permitted by the code. If they were submitting an application to do perhaps a daycare center, the property was already zoned R4, but they wanted to do a daycare center in the middle of this neighborhood or the edge of this neighborhood because that's a service that people are needing, and they found that, then I would go here to special use permits and go, okay, so a child care nursery is allowed in this particular district by special use permit. This application is requesting that. I understand that. There is, however, one thing that you need to take note of with regard to special use permits. In every single district or in a number of residential districts, there is a requirement that says if a lot does not have the required amount of lot width or lot size for that district, then the property can only be used for a single family detached dwelling. Meaning in the R4 district, the requirement of the lot is 9,000 square feet. But this particular lot that they've submitted the application for is 8,330 square feet. Well, that means they can only build a single family house on this particular piece of property. And maybe we didn't catch it in the office, but you caught it at the NPU and said, well, you're not going to be able to apply for this application. Apply for this special use permit for a child care because your lot is sufficient in size. Also, there's a location where special administrative permits are applicable in certain districts, and that is an SAP for short. So SAP means special administrative permit. You will remember that this year we expanded urban farms and urban gardens. They are allowed by a special administrative permit. And also you remember that allowance extended to you being allowed to sell, or persons who own those urban gardens and urban farms, to sell what they grow, so that we can provide more food to food deserts. That information would be housed here under special administrative permits. And then as you read further down, you'll see transitional uses, minimum lot requirements, minimum yards. You can check all of that with regard to the application that was submitted to you. And then there's information related to height, off-street parking requirements, sidewalks, etc. Sidewalks was added during the quick fixes phase 2 because, as you know, sidewalks are pretty important here in the city, providing mobility and pedestrian access to a number of uses, and places here in the city, as well as the relationship of building to street requirement, which requires the porches and or garages be recessed and window fenestration. All of that was added as a part of a design element addition in the residential zoning districts. Now, it's important, I stopped to take note of this because each one of the zoning districts has each one of these elements that I have listed. And if you've received an application And these elements are not consistent with what your neighborhood has said they want their land use to be, or the density that they're looking for, then these are the things that you would use to provide comment to either myself, really, because it would be a zoning action, to myself in your application when you are considering a denial for an application. It is also useful for you to use when you're considering an approval for an application. It's also useful for you to know when we make recommendations in the office and you may not quite understand why we're making the recommendation, because we are looking at it from a technical perspective. Let's say there's a piece of property that is on a major arteries being Northside Drive, being Peachtree, being MLK, being Campbellton Road. Those are all places that are corridors, that are major employment centers, and where density should be located. If we make a recommendation that says MRC3 is appropriate in that location, it is because we've gone to our code and we've gone to the district and we've pulled it up. And in the MRC3 district, MRC3 is designed to be a high-density commercial and residential uses along major corridors, intended to serve larger areas of the city and provide larger commercial uses with a significant employment concentration. This is also important when we have conversations with developers and other stakeholders, and they come in and ask for a project that says, we are coming in to build a project that is mixed use. And we say, well, tell us how it's mixed use. What are you providing? Oh, it's 445 apartments. And we go, that's not mixed use. That's a multifamily development. So why are you seeking to do an MRC3 when that is a mixed use category? And usually the response is, oh, we're looking for more density. Yeah, we get you're looking for more density, but you're only providing a certain product. So staff in the office will push the applicant and say, well, let's talk about what you're actually trying to provide to the residents in this community. If you're trying to provide them mixed use, then you need to provide them a mixed use component. And in turn, you as residents, you as stakeholders would say to an applicant when they come to you, well, what is it that you're trying to provide? And they tell you they're doing a 445 unit apartment building. And you say, well, I thought you told me you were doing a mixed use project. So that's why I want to take that time there. We can talk about it more than question and answer. It's 6:47. I am behind my time. I'm horrible today. I'm so very sorry. And let me get to some other things. I want to make sure I leave enough time for questions, and let me look at my presentation to see if there's anything that I need to highlight and go over before I do questions. Let's just take questions, and then so we'll have time. I'll stop there.
Can you start with some of the questions you received
In the chat?
Yeah, well, maybe I can scroll up a little bit. In what instance is an approval appealed by an applicant?
What is never an approval? I've never seen anyone appeal an approval.
How are zoning committee members chosen?
They're chosen, zoning committee members of council are chosen by the council president.
No. When a new owner seeks a zoning change with a commercial mix, what steps should the community follow, and how can they process the timeline? I believe that's what they're asking. Michael Nolan, can you add, I want to make sure I'm asking it correctly. Can you unmute yourself and ask that?
Hey, thanks for that. So when a new development or a new builder comes to the community and they want to do a mix, not necessarily multifamily, but if they want to do a mix of multifamily and, retail and whatnot, what steps should the community follow, and what is the timeline? Because, you know, they push those permits pretty fast. So the community is always catching up. So like, what steps do we follow, and how should that actually work? Because, you know, we may be really excited about it or not excited about it, but we want to know the timeline to flesh it out.
When the application is received by the NPU chair and the zoning contact, I would think that whomever is responsible in the neighborhood would when they receive the application, immediately schedule it for whatever neighborhood meeting or neighborhood committee or body or whatever it appears before. Whomever is responsible for receiving that application should assign it to him, immediately assign it to whomever it needs to be assigned to. Or if it's themselves, they should be reading that application to determine what the request is. The next thing you should do is contact the applicant if the applicant hasn't already contacted you, and talk through the applicant's request to make sure they are requesting what it is, what they're requesting, what it is, if you are requesting what it is that you want to see in your community. Meaning, if they are proposing a mixed use project on a local street, is a mixed use project at the FAR that they're proposing it appropriate on that particular street? Because some things are more appropriate on local streets and more things are appropriate on major corridors. So if they're proposing something really high and intense interior to your neighborhood, is that appropriate? Are you acceptable of that or not? And then whatever feedback you've gathered from that, that's the feedback you provide to the applicant so that they know immediately, we're in favor of this or we're not in favor of this.
Thank you. That was great. Real quick, are there any hard deadlines the community should meet in that kind of situation?
So the applicant, when you receive the application itself tells you what hearing it is supposed to be scheduled for. So if someone submitted an application, so we just closed the April hearing cycle. So that means applications were submitted the first Tuesday in February. Those applications are scheduled to be heard by Zoning Review Board in April. So that means those applications have been received. That means it will go on to the NPU meeting in March. So the timing of some neighborhood meetings and NPU meetings doesn't line up with the time that the application is received and it goes through the process, which is fine. If it's not going to meet your schedule, then you have to communicate with the applicant and with the planner and say, it's not going to meet our schedule, but we are going to schedule it for whatever the next available meeting is. But to receive the application and not communicate with anybody, that means everybody is in the dark.
Oh God, thank you so much. That was very helpful. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Sam, you frozen?
No, I am, because there's so many questions coming in. So I'm trying to, does the city take neighborhood master plan seriously, especially if they have been adopted into the CDP?
Yes, we review all the information related to any small area plans and anything that's adopted into the CDP. I don't understand what the phrase take seriously means. I mean, there has to be a judgment made or decision made in certain instances. There are instances where properties are on a corridor and a local street. And so we have to make a decision whether the corridor is the thing that has to be respected or not respected, but the corridor is the thing that needs to be supported or the local street that needs to be supported. Because if you're on a corridor and a local street, you're kind of in a half and half. You're trying not to be too intense So that's why we have transitional yards and buffers and those kinds of things. But if it fronts on a corridor, we will also support what's going to happen on the corridor as well.
What's the status of the backlog in permitting?
The status of the backlog in permitting. Well, we've all been affected by a number of things. There are a lot of people that are transitioning either in or out of the city. There have been, but we are trying to review all applications as quickly as possible, given all of the things that people are dealing with right now.
Who makes up the zoning review board and how are they selected?
The zoning ordinance dictates how persons are placed on the board. Each of the council persons in a pairing of 3. So each council person per district and 1 at-large council person in a pairing has 6 seats on the board, and then the mayor has 3 seats on the board.
Is it possible for us to have a cheat sheet of commonly used abbreviations for this course, zoning?
I think I can do that.
Let's see here. Do the planners or anyone else in the Department of Zoning Development ever go to the locations where an application has been submitted to really understand what is going on?
Yes, I was on a site. I was actually on a site visit about 2 weeks ago.
In a hypothetical example where everything goes perfectly in the general procedures, what is the length of time between an application being filed with OZD to being approved by the mayor?
Perfect timing, meaning nothing has happened, nothing has happened. Perfect timing is about 90 days.
Okay, let's see here. Are there case studies that we can review?
Case studies related to?
Jamie Turner, would you like to expound on that? I'm gonna come back to that.
Yes. I was just asking, I'm new to the neighborhood planning committee, and I just wanted to know if there are like case studies as far as any permits or submissions for rezoning or zoning, and just to see what the application looked like. I don't know if we went over what is all required for application, and as a neighborhood committee member, what exactly is our purpose for reviewing that application if we are available to review.
We have not gone over an application. I can actually pull the application up for you. So if you are on our website, that is the city planning website, we have a section called zoning development and permitting services. Under that link, you'll find applications, forms, and checklists. And this is all the applications, forms, checklists that development services use, whether in the Office of Buildings or the Office of Zoning and Development. For a zoning review board application, at the very bottom, because it's alphabetical, you'll find either the special use permit application or the application for rezoning. They've all been changed to fillable forms since COVID. And they are available for download there. So on the front of every application or application related to special use permit, rezoning, and board of zoning adjustment, there's a listing that we actually need to update. There's a listing of all the items that are required for an application. There's the application form. That form must be notarized, and documented impact analysis, which is an analysis of the project itself, site plan, property description, For a rezoning application, you're required to submit a form for the Atlanta Public Schools for them to review with related to how its impact on schools. Affordable housing became quite of an issue in 2017. And so there's a supplemental form related to any housing assistance that you may be using to create affordable housing units and other affordable housing questions. There's a property owner authorization. And then if you're going to use legal representation, there's also a form for that attorney to sign. If there's going to be a land use amendment, there is the CDP form that needs to be completed. Tree replacement form, disclosure. Disclosure is required for a rezoning application because of the interest involved. The disclosure form is for persons to tell us whether or not they've donated to any campaigns, any person on city council, those kinds of things. And then the last form in the packet is the pre-application form for PD or any other pre-application requirement associated with an application that you have to submit. And so while it looks like the fee schedule and the fee schedule and the ZRB schedule are the very last documents on the application. And it looks like a lot of information, but it's actually not. A lot of it is repetitive. And a lot of it goes to different people in the department. The inclusionary zoning requirements came into play about 2017. And so if you're on the Beltline, if you're any of the West Side neighborhoods, and now if you're in West Side neighborhoods, including the Grove Park neighborhood areas, there's an inclusionary zoning requirement, meaning if you build new housing, new rental housing in any of those areas, and you build more than 10 units, then you must do a set aside of a number of those units in order for your project to move forward and get approved for to provide for affordable housing in those developments. With regard to case studies, I don't know of any zoning case studies. A lot of the information that I use is produced by the American Planning Association. And there's a lot of information on that website. And there are links to all of the local or the state level planning associations, GPA, Alabama Planning Association, and Ohio. I mean, everyone has one. So you can research that on your own. Any type of policy or initiative related to planning, there's some type of policy book out there, and you could probably find it on the American Planning Association's website. And I hope that answers your question, Mr. Turner.
Okay. What is the order of precedence of ordinances when a historic district is involved?
Great question. So we've got lots of layers of zoning. So there can be a property, particularly Grant Park. There are portions of Grant Park that have an underlying zoning, meaning the property is zoned R5. Then there is the Grant Park Historic District. And then I believe there's also some overlay requirements. So the way that the historic district requirements are written, the historic district requirements state that in certain places, the historic district regulations are the regulations that are applicable. But then in certain instances, the underlying R5 regulations are applicable. So the property would have an R5 zoning, which means the property is zoned R5. It allows two family or one family structures. Then the Grant Park Historic District regulations would also be applicable, and that would determine how the building looks. If there is a variance that is required for that property, then it's the Urban Design Commission that would be responsible for hearing that variance. And then if there are the Beltline requirements also that are applicable to that particular piece of property, the historic district regulations will also be paramount, but Beltline would also opine on the project, and then Beltline and UDC staff would have to work together. Now that is to say, because there are certain places in the city where there are several layers of zoning, that is why the teams or the staff persons in the Department of City Planning have to work so closely with each other, because we have certain layers, and at a certain point there's a handoff to one group or not. but usually we all work together so that we don't have any inconsistencies in the information once the project is finished, that the developer or the homeowner or whomever is submitting for the permit, they have finished and everything has been resolved.
Can a commercially zoned building, for example, a corner store, be sold and redeveloped as mixed-use housing? What could the neighborhood do if they are not in agreement?
If the grocery store is currently C1 and the property is proposed to be redeveloped to allow multifamily, the property in the grocery store is going to stay?
Well, let's see here.
No, the grocery store wouldn't stay.
Grocery store is going to, okay, but it's going to, so the grocery store is going to go away and now it's going to be multifamily
Correct.
only.
Correct.
And you don't want to rezone?
That's right.
Yeah, I don't know how you do that. It can't, what can I ask why you don't want to rezone the property?
Well, that's just it. We want it to go back to mixed use, like just a regular home.
Oh, so you want the commercial use to go away completely,
Correct.
and the property owner does not want that. He wants it to stay commercial.
Probably, yes.
Okay. And your land use for that, and when you did your the last time you changed the land use map said it was residential or commercial?
It's commercial.
The only way to do it is that the property would have to either be rezoned to RLC, which is residential limited commercial, or rezoned to a district that only allowed residential uses if you're trying to go residential, or to a district that allowed mixed use if you're trying to do a mixed use district or mixed use site.
And that was RL, what was the first one?
RLC, residential limited commercial.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
Can the city provide a list of independent attorneys who specialize in zoning and land use?
Nope. But I can tell you some firms. You on your own. What should I tell you? The firm now? You on your own. Morris, Menon and Martin, Smith, Gambrell and Russell, Wilson, Brock and Irby, what's the big people? Denton's.
And AJT Locketta.
Oh,
So
that's
you
okay. That's fine. Thank you. Is there any way you can type those in the chat or something, or can I email you to get them?
I can type them in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, of zoning in the class or I don't understand that. Brian, I'm trying to up zoning in the class or I don't think I understand your question. If you could ask it. Brian Sumlin?
You said I could ask, I could talk.
Yes.
Okay, so several neighborhoods, coming to the consensus that they want light rail along Hamilton Road. Of course, you know about the big fiasco. So would that whole area require to be, would it be required to be rezoned to accommodate such a system? Or what would be an ideal process of that? Thank you.
Actually, most of Campbellton Road right now already has a zoning category of mixed residential commercial. There are only a few spots that still have commercial, neighborhood commercial zoning on it. I can tell you that representatives from NPUP and NPUR engaged council member Overstreet last year to create a Campbellton Road overlay that is currently circulating in NPUP and R, and they should have their overlay in place by probably before council goes on recess in April. But there is no required that for that to happen. Now, I don't have an opinion. Listen, I don't have an opinion on MARTA and what MARTA is doing. I, as a resident, have an opinion, but as Department of City Planning, Office of Zoning Development, I don't have an opinion. But that is not a requirement for the rezoning of Campbellton Road. Doesn't have anything to do with what MARTA is trying to do or not do on Campbellton.
Okay, I understand. I just, because that was another question that was floating around too in the social media network, was about does the whole corridor need to be rezoned to accommodate such a system? But thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think these other ones you've already actually answered. Yeah, you've answered these already. Right, back on you, Kieta, if you have another part.
Okay, well, I actually, I can talk about other portions of my presentation here. Let me see. Just to give a little bit more context to what we've been discussing, unless anybody has any other questions.
I'm looking, no raised hands.
Okay, so floor area ratio. Floor area, or FAR, as you commonly hear us talk about it, FAR is the amount of floor area that may be built as a ratio to the size of the site. So an FAR equal to 3.0 is 30,000 square, in this particular example, 30,000 square feet of floor area. Half the site is covered with 6 floors. So FAR is really related to the bulkiness, or how much bulk can it be on a particular site. It really doesn't, I'm not gonna say it doesn't mean anything. It really doesn't mean anything to the average citizen unless you're sitting with a code and a site plan and you're really kind of hashing the numbers out about what the FAR is, unless unless you're like someone who's really into that kind of thing. But you really don't know what it looks like until it's actually built, because in this example, all 3 of these buildings have the exact same FAR, but they're built differently on the site. And so for the average person looking at it, it doesn't really mean anything. But FAR really is about, for us, me, from a technical perspective, how much FAR is allowed on a particular site in particular areas. MRC3 is the absolute highest FAR in the city of Atlanta, 8.2, and allows a building up to 225 feet. I know that that's not appropriate in certain neighborhoods and on certain streets. It's really appropriate, on big streets like Peachtree and Campbellton and those kinds of places. And so when we're talking about it with our residents, we're talking about FAR. That's the kind of thing that we're evaluating. How much bulk is going to be on this building, how tall it's going to be, what is it going to look like next to other smaller buildings that may already appear on the street. Transitional height planes and yards. This is very important, especially in areas. I believe someone asked the question about, or when I gave the example about places that are on a corridor and on a local street. Of course, there are lots of places in Midtown where immediately behind the big developments are houses, right? Houses that have existed there for a long period of time. And so transitional height plane is to prevent the building from overshadowing what's already built or the built environment behind it. The transitional height plan requires that a development site measures up 35 feet and then there's an angle of 45 for the transitional height plane to keep the building from overpowering anything that it could be shorter or a residential neighborhood that's immediately adjacent to it. Design standards, we really are supportive of design standards requiring sidewalks to be of a certain size so that there is the pedestrian feels safer when they're walking along the street. We also require fenestration. Fenestration relates to the windows, how open it is so that people feel safe when they're walking down the street, not allowing fences to go up, adding trees. Trees are important for shade, especially on hot summer days here in Georgia when, it's really hot, but you can have a street where there's shade trees or people can, get a little bit of respite when they're walking down the street. And so we come up with these design standards also to provide some type of building articulation. So you don't get all these flat buildings, that you have some type of design related to them, and it gives some type of character to the neighborhood in which they are, which they exist. There is the Office of Design was established under Commissioner Keene, and they are establishing a process by which developments, I believe of a certain size, will have to go through an additional review to ensure that the kind of building that they are designing and providing to the residents of the city, provide some type of depth and character. With regard to single family homes, the requirement that a garage be recessed behind the front door of the house. So the garage isn't that thing that pushes up and, you've seen those houses where the garage is the first thing that you see and the only thing that you see. There's also a requirement related to porches and stoops to provide neighborhood character. So if all the other houses on the street have a porch or a stoop, you also will be required to have a porch or a stoop. To provide, that, neighborhood character and neighborhood building that we all desire in our urban neighborhoods. We require pedestrian entrances be full of characters, have, the signage is clear, the addressing is clear so people can find locations, and it doesn't appear to be like those dead spaces, those old suburban areas where it doesn't really feel appealing to people. And there's also more of a desire to prevent windows from being obstructed by signs and have all those lights around it and all those kinds of things that don't really make a neighborhood wanting and inviting for people. And all those things are covered in zoning regulations, and all those things are usually checked in an SAP to make sure that they are compliant with the zoning regulations. Most importantly, about any type of zoning application that is received is that there be full disclosure that anyone who is involved in the reviewing process or involved in any of the community engagement processes that are a part of the zoning application is that everyone who is involved is a part of the conversation, and that no one is receiving information that no one else is not receiving, and everybody is getting the same information at the same time. Everybody's being able to make the same decisions at the same time, and that there is no communication with anybody at one point and not with someone else on the other point. Now, your decisions are very important. They're important to you and they're important to us as staff. All the decisions that you make should be based on facts. The facts that you use are the facts in the zoning district of which the applicant is asking. You use the standards in the zoning district to base your decisions on. The facts should address the merits of the application. The burden of proof is on the applicant. The applicant is coming to you asking for a zoning change, and so it is incumbent on the applicant to provide to you all the information that you need to make your decision. Information is not the same thing as facts. Make sure that the property characteristics are the facts related to the property and that someone isn't feeding you information that is not true. Make sure that you also are weighing the evidence in conjunction with the code. That is the major responsibility, that no one else is providing you secondhand information. And if you are a decision maker, if you're a part of a board or an organization, or if you are just a layperson that is trying to make a decision for a recommendation to either the neighborhood or to the NPU, that you've read the code yourself, that you provide, you have weighed your evidence, and that you are providing your recommendation based upon what you think and you think alone. Make sure that you're not basing your decision on anyone's opinions or public sentiment, and focus on the facts and merits of the current case rather than possible precedent for future cases. This is very, 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 very important. Only evaluate it based upon the case that is in front of you. Because even if it seems that it's similar to an application you've received before and reviewed before, this particular piece of property is different in some way from that particular piece of property. Even if it's next door, even if it's around the corner, even if it's a part of a larger site, this particular piece of property is different from any other piece of property that you've made a decision on before. Conditions. Conditions are very, very important. I know that they are very important to most of the MPUs. We receive them, and as we can add them to an application, we're more than happy to add them to an application if we feel as though it will not encumber the development of the project. Please remember that conditions are intended to mitigate a potential or realistic impact. Your conditions are related to the how the property is circulated with regard to traffic. That condition can be that the property only has a right in and a right out on a particular street because you are aware of traffic congestion on this particular street. And this development that's proposed is going to have a lot of traffic. So you are conditioning it to only a one-way traffic in and out. You are conditioning it to how many units are a part of the development. While the applicant may say, oh, I'm able to build up to 500 units, and you say, well, 500 units may be okay. You are on a corridor, I accept it, but I don't think 500 units is appropriate here. So we're going to condition you down to 250 units, and that's appropriate for this particular piece of property. That is a condition that is going to mitigate any type of potential impact on the property. Please state the conditions clearly. If you feel as though I want to really say this condition, but I don't know how to say it, please reach out to me and I will help you put the condition together. Please reach out to any of the planners on staff. They'll help you put the condition together so that once we receive the condition and we're adding it to, if we're going to accept it as a part of the staff's recommendation or provide it to the zoning review board or to the board of zoning adjustment, that it is very clear and no one is trying to figure out what you are requesting. Please remember that conditions must have a rational connection to the impact of the project. It must be roughly proportional to the impact of the project, and it must be enforceable by administrative staff. That means if you have added a condition and you contact me and say, Kieta, we had a condition on a zoning project and it said X, and I need you to send somebody out to investigate it. I said, okay, sure, I'll send it to Code Busters and zoning enforcement can come out and check it. If zoning enforcement gets out there and they can't check it because it doesn't make sense or it wasn't something that was enforceable, you're mad at me because I put a condition that we couldn't enforce. So let's not do that. Okay. So here are all the resources that you can use related to our office, our GIS, our forms and our applications, the zoning ordinance, the permit navigator, and a seller. And with that, I will close out and ask, are there any questions?
So our next question, what is zero lots line? Do you need a variance for this?
No, you do not need you do not need a variance for a zero lot line. Zero lot line was established in the zoning code many years ago, and it's applicable to usually townhomes or to duplexes. So you know that those can be sold individually. And so if you're building if you're building a number of them, so you have a piece of property where you have a number of townhomes on it, you can zero lot line it, meaning you create a zero lot line along the wall line where the two units meet, and administratively those two are subdivided, and each one of them have an individual parcel for real estate and selling purposes.
If an NPU's bylaws states a developer must meet with the affected neighborhood association prior to the NPU meeting, who informs the developer of this procedure?
The neighborhood planning unit.
What is the FAR for Campbellton Road?
FAR is established per site. So I would need to know an address.
All right, Mr. Nolan, Michael Nolan, if you're still on.
Yeah, I'm here. I guess if I could find an address for the intersection of DeLoe and Campbellton Road.
I believe that property is zoned, is this the DeLoe Plaza?
Yes,
Or
ma'am.
I believe that property is zoned MRC 3. So the FAR would be a combined 7.25.
But I guess I gotta go address by address to get the FAR for each individual property.
Yes, but are you specifically asking about DeLoe Plaza or all of them at that intersection?
No. I was asking about the whole Campbellton corridor. It's a lot going on between Oakland train station and 285. So that was my question.
Okay.
How does the FAR relate to overall height? Is there current height restriction adjustments being considered, the revisions being rewritten?
Height is a different height is established by each zoning district. FAR does not control height. FAR controls the bulkiness of the building. And then there's a separate regulation that controls height.
Can you explain how to read a land use and compatibility table? Also, is there a land use table for each NPU?
There's not a land use table for each NPU. There's only one land use and compatibility table. That table has all of the zoning districts across the top. And I'm trying to find it as I talk to you. All of the zoning districts across the top, and along the side is all of the applicable land uses, land use codes. Okay, so let's see if I can make this bigger. So if a property is zoned R1, it is compatible with the open space land use designation, single family, low density residential, medium density residential. That means you can build an R1, you can build a property or a structure on a piece of land that is zoned R1, and it can have a land use of single family residential. If your property has a single family residential, a single family land use designation, the compatible zoning districts are R1 through R4B. If you wanted to build a duplex on this particular piece of property, which would mean your property would have to be rezoned to R5, you would have to, 1, rezone the property to R5, and then 2, apply for a land use change to low density residential. Does that answer your question? Or the person who asked the question about land use?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
At what point can conditions not be assigned to an application? Can conditions be made when it gets to the zoning committee, or is the ZRB the final stop?
City council person can add any type of condition that they want to a project. I prefer not to do it as zoning review board because things get lost in translation. We're in the middle of a hearing. But a city council person can add a condition at any point that they want to. And at that time, staff is no longer, once the project gets to the zoning committee, is in the hands of city council.
Do properties with 0 lot lines still have restrictions regarding how much coverage of the property?
Yes.
Okay. Assuming that a developer is seeking reference from R3 to PDH, and the community and the developer agree on a set of conditions, are those conditions binding on the HOA that is established later?
Depends. It would depend on whether or not all the conditions were adopted with the PDH rezoning, 1. 2, if all the conditions were not adopted with the PDH rezoning, was there a private agreement that required the HOA to adopt those conditions and move those conditions forward? So when you are considering any type of private agreements with a developer whom will probably go away and the homeowners association will be enacted, then your private agreement would need to say these conditions would need to be or a part of the homeowners association agreements or bylaws that are created.
Okay. Well, do we have any more questions? I'm looking for raised hands. Seeing none. We are making absolute wonderful time. We're not allowed to come up. Are CBA's community beneficial agreements legal and binding?
Between the two parties that established them, they are. The city, however, is not a party of them and does not enforce them.
Okay, let's see here. All right. No, I don't think she actually needs help with the permits. We have staff for that, Brian. Okay. Well, if we have no more questions, first, thank you so much, Kia.
We got homework. We got homework. We have homework. All of you who will be Miss Myrick.
Hi, I guess I missed my question. If there's someone that wants to build like a large multifamily building on a large tract of land, like in a residential area, there's houses around, and it's been forested, do they have to do a wildlife impact study, like an environmental impact study for a building such as that?
No, ma'am, no, they don't.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome. Miss Nicholson.
Hi, I'd like to go back to the land use table. If it's unshaded, does that mean you would need to, if that section, so as you were discussing the R5 and if it's unshaded next to single family, is that when there needs to be an application to change the zoning? So
yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was trying to find a way to explain it better, but the way that I'm looking at it is if it's shaded under that land use designation, that means it's permissible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and if it's not shaded, like the R5 single family,
that's correct.
That means you need to apply for zoning change.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Sumlin.
Yes, you had probably covered this earlier, but about so you do come on the ground. Yeah, the department does come on the ground to the actual site for these developers, because what we see happening, I can't speak for all the MPUs, but probably for mine, is that they stuff these amount of units in a small area on the map. So what constitutes that, and what's the process that you do when you're on the ground to evaluate, I know you evaluate the whole scenario. Give us a little bit of an example of how that happens. Thank you. Am I making?
So you want to know what we do on a site visit?
Well, I guess, yes. Like, if you know, like, say, for example, you got like 2 blocks. I'm just giving some, I'm just giving a basic example because it's zoning 101. Okay, 2 blocks, and you want to put like 400 units. I'm just giving a number in that 2 blocks time frame, in that frame. What's the checklist that you do to determine, okay, that'll work, or if it doesn't work, or do they need to revise their plans or whatnot? What is it that you would do in that scenario?
Okay, so when I can tell you that we have a lot of experience, meaning a number of people in the Office of Zoning and Development have been in development services for a number of years. So when we say we know the city, we know the city. I'm a resident of Atlanta, born and raised in Atlanta. And so I know a whole lot of places, like in my mind. I know in my mind, I can see them in my mind's eye. But so we do a lot of talking about those kinds of things before we even leave the office. We had a recent application for a special exception for a project in West Atlanta. And we wanted to see how the use operated. So we got in our car, we went over there and we sat and we watched the operation of the business. And we went back at night and watched the operation of the business again. And we do those kinds of things to evaluate the best, whether or not the request is beneficial and fits within the zoning requirements, and does it meet the regulations of the zoning ordinance.
Oh, okay, I see what you mean. Because, okay, thank you.
Let's see. Is there?
So I guess really, I don't know, did someone else have a question? I didn't want to interrupt nobody.
I think Sam was about to ask another question. Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah. Is there any compliances that should be followed when it comes to ADUs on SFR properties in Fulton?
Say that one more time.
Are there any compliances that should be followed when it comes to ADUs on SFR properties in Fulton County?
An ADU is only permitted to be 750 square feet. It has certain side and rear setback requirements it must comply with, and it has height restrictions that it must comply with. All of those are listed in the particular zoning districts, R4, R4A, and R5. And when someone submits an application to build an ADU, all of those are checked in their permitting documents.
With plans for a multifamily MRC development near state waters, South River, need to have a hydrology report included in site plans? And could we also access or review it?
A hydrology report is not required by zoning. Site development may require a hydrology report, but it's not required by my office.
Okay.
And if site development requires it, they will require it on LDP, land disturbance permit.
Okay, so also for this parcel, apparently when something's been rezoned to MRC, developers are not required to solicit neighborhood input. Is there a way for neighborhoods to have input when a property has been rezoned to MRC2? I guess the Value Village parcel down Moreland.
When that property was annexed into the city, there was public comment. And then, yeah, I remember that property when it was annexed into the city, there was public comment on the zoning that was applied there. So the public comment would have been taken during the zoning for the annexation.
Does a duplex being built in R5 in an R5 zone have less of a lot coverage requirement, or is it the same as if it was a single family home?
No, lot coverage is established per the zoning district. R5, I think, is 0.55 and R4 maybe 0.5 or the reverse.
Will the homework be emailed?
I will email the homework to Sam.
Yes, it will be emailed. For a property that is currently zoned for single family homes, what's the process for sorting the zoning requirements to add a tiny home onto the property?
Tiny homes in the city are called and classified as accessory dwelling units. If an accessory dwelling unit is permitted in your zoning district, it will be found under accessory uses and structures. But I can tell you that ADUs are only allowed in R4, R4A, and R5 zone properties.
All right, thank you. I am curious about the gas station being built at the corner of Benjamin E. Mays and Fairburn Road. Because this is a tight corridor and there are gas stations within a short distance, how does zoning for this work?
That project received a waiver from the city council person to put in that gas station at that location. As I understand it, it will include a number of commercial spaces for other non-residential uses, including a restaurant. I saw a sign over there the other day that said Milk and Honey was coming there. I'm sure as you're familiar with that area, it does need a lot of non-residential uses to serve the community, but it did receive a waiver on the distance requirement for the gas station.
Okay, let's see.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How can a neighborhood address the stormwater runoff from new developments? Charleswood Park has a new influx of developments, and the neighborhood is concerned that the current requirements are not sufficient.
Well, each of the project is required to meet the stormwater requirement established by site development, and each of them is supposed to meet them on each individual site. If you feel as though they're not making it, I think, I don't know what the technical number of what they require, but you can always add additional to it as a part of a condition. I've actually seen that done on a project. Was it Chosewood? I thought it was Chosewood, but they did that, added additional stormwater requirement as a part of a condition.
And Brian, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, this is probably my last one. So about that last question, let's go back to that development piece again. So the surround, you go on the ground, you look at the overall operations of the property. Do you consider the traffic too? Like, say for example, if it's 400 apartments and retail, and it's 2-lane roads surrounding everything. Given us a brief example of how would you incorporate that into the plan? Thank you.
So it would, well, depending on the zoning district, we limit the number of curb cuts. That's one. Two, we would think about the circulation on the project, where the traffic comes into and dumps out of. If it's bounded by local roads, that's probably going to be a recommendation from staff of denial if it's a zoning district that isn't appropriate for that location.
Okay. You spoke on brownfield uses. How can zoning reviews encourage using these before using new land? And congratulations on your EPA recognition.
So we have given a lot of revolving loan funds to different projects throughout the city. We've given money most recently to a project on Paul Avenue for cleanup. We've given money to FCS for a fuel tank removal for the gas station that was at the corner of McDonough in Jonesboro. We've given money to Pratt Pullman for the redevelopment of the Pratt Pullman site. And so, and we've given money to an area off of Murphy Avenue for site cleanup. The really developers come to us and ask, they're developing a project and then they need cleanup dollars. And we are more than happy to provide that to them. But a lot of people find their own funding to do their cleanup because you've got to meet certain requirements to get money from the city related to the EPA program. And thank you so much. We're really proud of our brownfield program. And we actually have a brownfield website listing all of the projects that we've donated to. And we're actually we're about to submit another application for another inducement of funds to do more brownfield work.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kieta, did you want to talk about the homework?
Yes, I do. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to, since I want it to be very easy, I'm going to select a piece of property on, let's take the Westgate Plaza. And let me get that address for you. Hold on just a moment. Because we need a lot of love in the Greenbrier area. So I am going to ask each one of you who joined the zoning fundamentals class to download an application to rezone this particular property. I'm not going to give you a zoning category. I'm going to allow you to pick your own zoning category and you create whatever vision that you have for this particular piece of property. And why can I not find what I'm looking for? The property is addressed 3131 Campbellton Road.
Can you put that in the chat?
Yes, I can.
Just put it in the chat for you.
Everyone is requested to download the rezoning application, to complete the application and rezone the property for 3131 Campbellton Road. You can rezone it and ask for a land use amendment. But what I want to see is some really good ideas. And we'll dig into it at our next meeting.
Okay, so
I got you.
We're also going to email these out in our follow-up and evaluation email. So look for that in your email as well as the slides, the PDF for the slides of the course, since a lot of you all asked about that in our chat. I think we have one more question. I am curious about the development near the corner of Fairburn Road and DL Hollowell. It looks like a huge apartment complex, possibly with another new gas station slated to come behind it. With so much density already in the area, how did zoning work in this instance?
So on the right hand or on the north side of the road is a warehouse that's coming that fronts on Fulton Industrial. On the west side of the road, it is an apartment complex. It was done maybe 2005 or so. It's an old rezoning, and they just got the money to go to development on that one. So I'm actually on both sides. So it's the warehouse, and then behind the warehouse is an affordable housing project, and then across the street is another multifamily project.
Okay. Also, I see Leah is on. Hi, Leah, did you want to say some things before we close out?
I won't pass up an opportunity to say hello. Thank you, Sam. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to NPU University. It looks like from the chat section, it looks like everyone enjoyed this class. I know that it was informative because I've been to this class a couple times already, and we get the best remarks and feedback about this class. So I hope that you've enjoyed it as well. I can give a shout out to my team. Thank you, Samantha, for producing the class. And of course, thank you to Kieta for teaching this class. I always say that there is no one at City Hall that knows zoning better than Kieta Holmes, and we could not possibly have found anyone better suited to teach this class for us other than Kieta. So thank you all for being here. And I hope to see you at some of our future classes.
So that will allow me to transition to show you all the upcoming classes that you can look forward to. And so is it not sharing? It is not sharing the screen.
It's sharing, Samantha. I see it.
Oh, okay. So the upcoming NPU University courses we have, our next will be CL 1003, actually 001, and that's Parliamentary Procedures 1, Introduction to Parliamentary Procedures. That's on Thursday, March 10th. Then there's our CD 1003.001, Housing Security Series. This is actually the first time that we'll be teaching this course on home scams, property tax exemptions, and tax appeals. And that is also on a Thursday, March 24th. And then the follow-up to this course, P1004.002, Zoning Fundamentals 2, have your homework ready. That is going to be on a Tuesday, March 29th. And all these, the courses are normally, the registration is available 30 days prior to the course. So you can go online and register at npuatlanta.org. And you can also look for updates at our social media sites, which includes Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at the handle NPU Atlanta, and on Nextdoor, City of Atlanta Neighborhood Planning Units. So come back, it won't let me stop sharing right now. But that would actually conclude our course tonight. And I thank everyone for sticking around to get all this wonderful zoning information. And we look forward to seeing you in the next course.
Samantha, do we have a date for Zoning Fundamentals 2?
Yes.
What's the date?
That date is March 29th, Tuesday, March 29th.
Awesome, thank you. So whoever asked that question in the chat, it went by quickly, so I don't know who it was, but March 29th is the next class, the next Zoning Fundamentals class.
Everyone look for an email. We would love to receive your feedback on this course. If you have any specific questions that you would like to, that didn't get answered as well, we have an evaluation that we send out, and we would greatly appreciate your input so that we can improve on our courses in delivery. And that is it for tonight. You all have a good one.